The evening before my father's retirement party, our housekeeper knocked on my car window and whispered, "Don't go inside yet. Turn your engine off and stay very still." I almost laughed. Margaret had been with our family for 23 years. She taught me how to braid my hair when I was 9. She sat with me in the hospital waiting room the night my mother had her appendix removed. She is not a dramatic woman. She does not knock on car windows and issue mysterious instructions. But she wasn't laughing. "My name is Claire. I'm 31 years old. I'm the oldest of 2 children, and for the past 6 years, I have been the one quietly holding my father's company together with both hands while everyone else took credit for the view." I was parked outside my childhood home, still in my work blazer, a box of custom ribbon-printed napkins in my back seat for tomorrow's party. I had spent my lunch break picking them up. I had spent the previous Tuesday negotiating the catering contract. I had spent the previous month quietly restructuring the vendor payment schedule so the quarterly numbers would look clean before my father officially stepped back from leadership. That was how I showed love. I fixed things before anyone knew they were broken. Margaret's eyes were doing something I had never seen them do. She looked afraid. "There are people inside," she said, barely above a sound. "In your father's study. The door is cracked. Claire, please. Just sit here for a few minutes." Something in the way she said my name, not the casual Margaret warmth I had known my entire life, but something tighter, something protective made me turn the engine off. I sat. 12 minutes later, I heard the study windows slide open 2 inches. My father's house is old. The windows in his study face the driveway. I have always known this. Apparently, so had Margaret. The first voice I recognized was my brother's. He was laughing. I want to pause here and explain something about my brother, because this story is not complete without it. He is 27. He has worked in the family business for 14 months, most of which he spent in a role my father created specifically because my brother expressed interest in getting involved. The role had a title and a salary, and essentially no operational responsibility. I had never said a single word about this to my father. That was also how I showed love. "She won't even question it," my brother said. "She'll think it's a formality." Then my father's voice. Slower. More measured. But agreeing. "The board announcement tomorrow makes it official. After that, the restructuring is already filed." My stomach dropped before my brain could process why. Then the third voice. My boyfriend. He had been with us for 2.5 years. He met my family at Easter dinner. He helped me move offices when we expanded our downtown location. He told me, more than once, that watching me work was one of the most attractive things he had ever witnessed. He said I made competence look effortless. I had taken that as a compliment. "The transition clause is clean," he said. "As long as the announcement goes public tomorrow, the filing locks in." She signed the authorization in August. She thought it was the tax restructuring paperwork. August. I sat very still in my car and thought about August. In August, he had brought documents to dinner. He worked in financial consulting. He explained things to me calmly and thoroughly, the way he always did, with the patience of someone who genuinely wanted me to understand. Tax optimization strategy. Temporary restructuring for a more favorable fiscal year-end position. Standard procedure for companies at our revenue threshold. I had skimmed it over pasta. I had signed because I trusted him. "The operations division transfers to your name," my father said. Effective the morning after the announcement. "And Claire?" my brother asked. A pause. "Claire will remain with the company," my father said carefully. "In an advisory capacity." Advisory. I had rebuilt that company's vendor network from scratch during the worst 18 months of our industry's recent memory. I had renegotiated every major supplier contract. I had personally managed the relationship with our largest distribution partner for 4 years. I knew every clause in every agreement we had active. Advisory. Like a piece of furniture, they were repositioning, but not removing entirely. I sat in my car until the study windows slid closed again. Then I sat for another few minutes because I needed to be sure my face was doing nothing that would give me away. Margaret was still standing by the passenger door. When I finally stepped out, she looked at me the way someone looks at you when they're not sure how much you've heard, but they know it was enough. "How long have you known?" I asked her quietly. 2 weeks, she said. I wasn't sure if I was understanding it correctly. I'm sorry it took me this long. I put my hand on her arm. You told me, I said. That's everything. I went inside. I smiled. I helped set up the appetizer display. I confirmed the florist's delivery time for tomorrow morning. I kissed my father on the cheek and told him everything looked beautiful. My boyfriend was in the living room. He crossed the room when he saw me and put his arm around my waist, the way he always did. Easy. Comfortable. Like I was something familiar he had learned to hold. Long day? He asked. Getting longer, I said. He smiled. He thought I was talking about the party prep. I drove home alone that night. I set my bag down by the door, and I stood in my kitchen for a long time, not turning on the lights. Pain is interesting. When it's bad enough, it doesn't feel the way movies suggest it does. It doesn't make you cry immediately. It makes you very, very still. Like every system in your body just switched to emergency power and is rerouting everything toward a single function. Survival. I turned the lights on at 11:47. I made coffee. I opened my laptop. I want to be clear about something. I did not set out to destroy anyone. I set out to understand exactly what had been taken from me, and then I set out to demonstrate, quietly and thoroughly, why taking it had been a mistake. I pulled up every document I had signed in the past 18 months. August's paperwork was there. I read it this time. Not the summary, not the cover letter. Every page. The authorization language was buried in Section 4 of a 12-page restructuring supplement. Broad. Carefully worded. Designed to look like standard fiscal optimization language to anyone who trusted the person handing it to them. I had trusted him. But here is the thing about operational authority. It is not the same as ownership transfer, and operational authority, in our company, was layered. Because I had built it that way. 3 years ago, I had insisted on implementing a vendor agreement protocol that required dual authorization for any modifications to primary supplier terms. My father had called it excessive at the time. I had explained that it protected us during any leadership transition. He agreed because I was usually right about these things. Every major vendor contract we held listed me as the primary operational contact. Not the company, not the company's ownership. Me, by name, by title, by direct line. The authorization my boyfriend had walked me through in August transferred operational leadership. But it could not unilaterally transfer vendor relationships built under my direct authorization without my explicit, separate, current confirmation. I had never given that confirmation. By 1 a.m, I wasn't thinking about the party anymore. I was thinking about the 48 hours that followed it. The retirement party was exactly the kind of event my family was good at. My father stood at the center of it the way he always had, warm, gracious, the kind of man who makes a room feel like things are being held together by his presence alone. Guests kept pulling him aside to say kind things. Old colleagues, golf friends. My father's oldest friend, who had known him since college and still called him by a nickname I had never fully understood. I wore the green dress my boyfriend liked. I fixed the centerpiece arrangement on the main table when one of the flower stems started leaning wrong. I laughed at the right moments. And when my father tapped his glass and called the room to attention, I was standing near the back, beside the fireplace, holding a glass of sparkling water. He spoke about the company, about what it had meant to build something that lasted, about legacy and family and the honor of handing something real to the next generation. The screen behind him lit up. Documents. An org chart. My brother's name in the center of it. My boyfriend stepped slightly forward in the crowd. He found my eyes across the room. He smiled at me, small and careful, the smile of a person who is monitoring your reaction. I smiled back. Then, I excused myself to use the restroom. On the way, I stopped in the kitchen and said goodbye to Margaret quietly and thanked her for everything she had done. She held my hand for a moment. "Are you going to be all right?" she asked. "I already am," I said. I went home before the toast. That night, at 12:53 in the morning, I sent 3 emails. The first was to our primary distribution partner. I had worked with the operations director there for 4 years. We had salvaged their contract during a pricing dispute that almost ended the relationship. His personal cell number was in my phone under his first name. The email was professional, measured. It noted that I had become aware of a leadership transition announcement and wanted to clarify, for due diligence purposes, the authorization protocol that governed our current vendor agreement, specifically Section 9, which required my direct written authorization for any modifications during a transitional period. The second email was to our largest supplier. Similar language. Reference specific clause numbers. Carbon copied our legal team. The third email was to an industry publication that had been pursuing an interview with me for several months about operational resilience strategies in mid-sized companies. I confirmed my availability. Then I turned off my laptop, washed my face, and slept 7 hours. The next morning, at 8:51, my distribution partner's operations director replied. He was confused. He had received a notice the previous week about a leadership change. But per our agreement's terms, he needed to hear from me directly before proceeding with any order modifications. At 9:04, the supplier's account manager called the main company line. My brother picked up. I know this because my brother started texting me at 9:07. Claire, what did you send them? Claire, I need you to call me. At 9:17, my father called. I let it ring. At 9:22, my boyfriend called. I let it ring. At 9:31, the distribution partner put the pending Q4 order in review status, pending clarification from original signatory. At 9:48, my brother arrived at my apartment. He didn't knock gently. What are you doing? He said, when I opened the door. I was in jeans and a cardigan. I had already had coffee. I leaned against the doorframe. I'm protecting my operational agreements, I said. You're blowing everything up. I'm exercising the authority I never actually transferred, I said calmly. Which, if you read the August document carefully, and I have, now I never did. His jaw did something complicated. Dad is furious. I imagine he is. This was supposed to be clean. Most things are supposed to be, I said. Come inside or don't. I have a phone call at 10. He didn't come inside. By noon, the supplier had formally requested written confirmation of operational authority before releasing the next shipment. By 2 in the afternoon, our legal team had flagged a discrepancy in the authorization document's execution date. The supplement I signed in August had a clause effective date that predated some of the vendor agreements it purported to cover, which created an enforceability question. By Thursday morning, the industry publication ran a brief piece on operational authority structures in family business transitions. I was quoted. My name, my title, the one I still formally held. My father came to my apartment Thursday evening. He didn't look angry anymore. Anger had collapsed into something else. He stood in my living room, and he looked around at it slowly, the way you look at a room when you realize you have not been paying attention to what happens inside it. We can resolve this without it going further, he said. I know, I said. I've always been good at resolving things. He looked at me. I didn't think you'd fight? I asked. Or notice? He didn't answer, which was its own kind of answer. My brother texted that evening. It was long. It covered a range of emotions. Anger at first, then something that tried to be justification. He had always been overlooked. He had always been the one expected to catch up to me. It was exhausting living in my shadow. The plan had never been about hurting me, just about finally having something of his own. I read it twice. Then I set my phone down and thought about the times I had quietly helped him. The internship I arranged for him through a contact I had built over years. The recommendation letter I wrote when he applied for his first job out of college. The time I covered for him with my father when he missed a family obligation because he double-booked himself. I had done all of those things without being asked, because that was how I showed love. And apparently, love in our family had always been a resource that flowed in one direction. My boyfriend came on Friday night. He did not come angry. He came tired. There was something almost honest in it, and I think part of me had hoped there would be something real underneath all the careful strategy. He sat on the edge of my couch. I thought you would understand, eventually, he said. Your father approached me. It was already in motion. I was trying to protect you from the harder version of this conversation. I looked at him for a long time. Did you ever actually love me? I asked. Or did you just need someone inside the company? He opened his mouth. Then he closed it. And that was the answer. That silence was the cleanest thing he ever gave me. No performance, no recalibration. Just the truth, finally, arriving too late to matter. I stood up. I opened my front door. He left. The settlement conversation was scheduled for the following Tuesday. Conference room at a neutral law office. My father, his attorney, my brother, and me. They were expecting a negotiation. They were expecting me to demand my position back, or compensation, or some formal acknowledgement of what had happened. They were prepared for emotion. They were prepared for demands. I slid a single folder across the table. "I'm not here to reclaim my role," I said. My brother looked at my father. My father looked at the folder. Inside was a buyout proposal. Fair market valuation of my operational stake, calculated conservatively and documented thoroughly. Clean transfer terms. A timeline. And behind it, a single-page summary of a formal inquiry I had submitted to the state's business licensing office. Not alleging fraud, but requesting a procedural review of the authorization document's execution, given the date discrepancies our legal team had flagged. Inquiries don't make accusations. They just ask questions. And questions, once asked formally, have a way of generating paperwork. If I'm no longer operational leadership, I said, then my signature cannot appear on the transition authorization. If it does appear as it currently does, as the authorizing party, then the document's legal standing becomes complicated, especially with the date inconsistency. My father's attorney looked at the document, then at his client, then back at the document. "I'm not trying to burn anything down," I continued. "I'm offering a clean exit. For all of us." My father's hand was resting flat on the table. It wasn't moving. "Approve the buyout by end of week," I said. "And I'll withdraw the inquiry as resolved." My brother started to say something. My father stopped him with a look. By Friday, the transfer was complete. I sent a formal letter of resignation to the company. Gracious, professional. One paragraph. The kind of letter that reads well if anyone ever asks to see it. The industry publication ran a follow-up piece 2 weeks later. The family company's Q4 shipment had been delayed due to a vendor authorization dispute during a leadership transition. The piece used my quotes from the earlier interview without needing to explain anything further. My name was already on record as someone who understood how these structures worked. My brother called once. I answered. "Are you satisfied?" He asked. It wasn't really a question. It was the voice of someone who was trying to make the other person feel like the villain of a story they did not write. "I'm fine," I said honestly. "I hope you are too." I meant that. I did not hate my brother. I did not hate my father. Hating someone requires a certain investment of ongoing energy that I no longer had reason to give this family. I hung up. Then I did something I had been meaning to do for 2 weeks. I called Margaret. She picked up on the second ring. "I've been thinking about you," she said, before I could speak. "I wanted to say thank you," I told her. Properly. Not in passing. What you did standing there, telling me to stay in my car, you didn't have to do that. You risked your job. You risked an incredibly uncomfortable position in that house. She was quiet for a moment. "You were always the one who made sure I had what I needed," she said finally. Christmas bonus. The extra days when my sister was sick. "You think I didn't notice that your father forgot and you covered it without ever saying anything?" I had forgotten I had done that. "You're going to be fine, Claire," she said. "You were always the one who was going to be fine." I took Margaret to lunch the following week. We sat outside. It was a clear October afternoon, the kind where the light is gold and thin, and everything looks a little like a painting. She told me about her niece, who just started college. I told her about the consulting work I had already been offered by 2 separate firms after the publication piece ran. We talked for 2 hours. It was the best afternoon I had spent in a long time. My father texted once, 6 weeks later. Not an apology exactly, something more like an acknowledgement dressed as an apology. He said he hoped I was doing well. He said the transition was proceeding. He said he thought about calling more, but wasn't sure what to say. I replied that I appreciated the message. I did not tell him it was too late. It wasn't too late. But some doors, once you've walked through them cleanly and on your own terms, don't need to swing back open. They can just stay where they are. I signed with a mid-sized consulting firm in November. Brought 3 client relationships with me from prior work, all built on my name, my reputation, my decade of operational knowledge that had nothing to do with my family's company. I set up my own office in a building downtown with good light and a coffee shop on the ground floor. On my first morning there, I arrived early. The building's front desk attendant, a man named Gerald who had worked that desk, I later learned, for 11 years held the elevator for me. "You just moved in?" he asked. "First day," I said. He nodded. "Good energy up there on 14. Quiet floor. You'll like it." I thought briefly about Rafiq, about Margaret, about the ordinary people who show up faithfully, who see more than anyone gives them credit for, who sometimes know exactly when to knock on a car window. The world is full of people like that. The kind of loyalty that doesn't announce itself, the kind that just stands there in a driveway, at risk, waiting for you to turn your engine off and listen. I smiled at Gerald. "Thank you," I said. "And I meant it the way you mean something when you actually understand what it cost." The elevator doors closed. I pressed 14. And I went to build something that was entirely, completely, and finally my own.